Good morning, Jeff.
Hi, Charlotte.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. We're having a little difficulties this morning. I am the alternate host, and I'm not sure. I think everything is okay. I think so.
I can't start my video. It says the host has stopped it.
Hmm. Okay. Participants. It says we have four participants. I don't know who these four people are. Let's see. Okay. We seem to have some people are joining our webinars. Good morning. So, let's see. Okay. Jeff, I am trying
Oh, let's
because
see. Oh, no.
it does not say. Hmm. Okay. Try that. There you are. Can you unmute?
Yep, I can.
Okay. All right.
Okay, hold on a
Well,
second.
people are coming in. So we're in a practice session, everyone. So if you'll just give us a few minutes to get ourselves together, we'll be back to join you soon.
Charlotte, I'm testing this. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Perfect.
Well, Jeff and I have tested ours. We want to test your visual. There he is. So we've got some other panelists that have been invited. I'm not sure why. I see Robert Acock is coming in. There was a panelist link sent out to people, and I'm not sure why. Robert, I'm not sure why you were sent a panelist link to the webinar today. We're going through some transitions from changing over the system from the former event coordinator. So it's the OER webinar today. There
Okay.
she. So yeah, if you were sent one, it wasn't on your schedule. I think it was just sent out. I'm not sure.
Okay.
She had some people in there inadvertently, and when Angela started the webinar, it just invited you.
Okay. So I don't need to attend this.
No, sir, you don't.
All right. Just wanted to make sure.
Unless,
All right. Thank you.
not unless you want to, right?
I
Right.
think I'll work on a few other things. No offense.
That's okay.
All right. Take care.
Okay. So we do have people coming in. I want to welcome you. We'll welcome you again when we begin. Right now, we are going to pause our audio and our visual, and we'll be back with you at 11 a.m. Central and 12 noon Eastern. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today with SREB's Open Educational Resources Summer Webinar Series. The Office of Post-Secondary Education Open Educational Resources welcomes you. Today's webinar will be recorded. Here's my contact information. I'm Charlotte Daly, the Program Specialist for OER in the Office of Post-Secondary Education at the Southern Regional Education Board. We want to give you some information about the OER initiative at SREB. We're funded by the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation in collaboration with Regional Education Compacts to form the National Consortium of Open Educational Resources, or NCOER. Through shared discounts, all of the member states in SREB can share in the Midwestern Higher Education Compact, or MAC. They have a contract with Creative Commons for existing and custom licensing for professional learning opportunities. This contract offers 15% discount to staff and institutional members of MEC and all sister compacts through June 2023. For more information, here is the web page and website. You can get more information from MEC. If you would like me to, I will drop this in the chat for you, and you can pick it up at your leisure. This summer, we'll be offering a total of 4 webinars. Our first one was on May 18th and is now available on demand. It was open licensing with Creative Commons. Today, we'll be talking with Jeff Gallant from Affordable Learning Georgia. On July 13th, we'll be talking with Daniel Williamson of OpenStax, where he'll discuss 10 years of publishing and the future of OER. On July 20th, we will be speaking with Robbie Melton, the Professor and Associate Vice President for National Smart Technology Innovation Center at Tennessee State University. She will bring to us all of the benefits of the HBCU Affordable Learning Solutions Community Portal. If you would like to attend the rest of our webinars, please register at www.sreb.org/webinars. Today, joining me is my friend and colleague, Tiffany Harrison. Tiffany is a research associate and analyst in the Office of Post-Secondary Education. She will be off camera, but she will be facilitating our Q&A portion of this session. So during the Q&A portion, please type your questions into the Q&A window. They will be answered in the order in which they are received. Another part of the webinar may ask questions of the audience. And during this time, please type your answers into the chat window and we will be restating them as they are received. So, Affordable Learning Georgia, a resource for OER. Today's guest is Jeff Gallant. Jeff is the Program Director of Affordable Learning Georgia. Jeff is here to discuss the initiative of the University System of Georgia, intended to promote student access and foster educational equity through supporting adoption, adaptation, and creation of affordable and open educational resources by USG faculty and professional staff. Jeff regularly consults with new open education programs and presents on program management, strategic planning, and presents on program management, strategic planning, grant programs, data collection, and reporting. Jeff is also a mentor in the SPARC Open Educational Leadership Program since its inception in 2017, and most recently served as my mentor as I completed the program as well. Today, let's all welcome Jeff Gallant, Program Director of Affordable Learning Georgia. Thank you for attending. I'm going to turn it over to you, Jeff.
Thank you so much. So I am going to now share my PowerPoint. Thank you for attending. I'm seeing attendees across the board, new folks, leaders of OER state programs, people doing their dissertations on OER. Hi, Gracia, how are you? So it's really nice to see such an interesting distribution of folks. I am presenting from Athens, Georgia, home of UGA and original home of the Muskogee Creek Nation. I am about to start the slideshow so that you can see it. I am not as proficient in Zoom as I am in Teams. Here we go. That didn't work. Let me try that again. There we are. Perfect. Okay. So today, anything that you see here, feel free to repurpose it later on. These slides are going to be distributed and they are Creative Commons Attribution licensed. So if you ever want to create some sort of guide or anything like that, you definitely can. This will be free for you to use. So some of you know me, but some of you do not. I was at one point a reference librarian at Valdosta State University, way in the south of Georgia, right on the Florida line. It was there that people started asking me at first, hey, do you have this ebook? I want to use this as a textbook for my course because students are paying way too much for this text otherwise. Textbook affordability kind of came to me at Valdosta State. I was also a music teacher before then. I played the saxophone. I was a music store clerk for my dad's CD store. He had a business that was a small local chain that was selling both music and videos and doing rentals until the digital age kind of moved in and displaced all of that. I've been an open advocate for a very long time, partially because of that background. I learned about Creative Commons in music first, and then I moved over to things like open source software and OER now. And the cute puppy you see on the screen is Rocket. I am a dog dad. Now, I don't want to mention a whole bunch of abbreviations and terms without you knowing what those are. And how Affordable Learning Georgia operates has to do with where we are. So the University System of Georgia is the USG. There are 26 state colleges and universities. The USG Board of Regents is over the entire organization. They are appointed by the governor. The Board of Regents selects the chancellor, who is the leader of the entire organization. Under that, there are a whole bunch of different offices. Ours is Academic Affairs. Affordable Learning Georgia is a part of Academic Affairs in the library services section of it. So we are an initiative to reduce the cost of textbooks to students. We started out with program funding, which meant that it was highly targeted. Everything that was going into that funding had to go towards reducing the cost of textbooks to students. It didn't start as just OER, and we are still not just OER, but it is something that we definitely focus on. So ALG is the initiative itself. It is also a set of different programs, including our grants, and it is our website, affordablelearninggeorgia.org, where you can go to get different tutorials, which are also open licensed, and you can see more about our grant projects and the data that we have over there. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how we got started looking at our big goal, how it turned into Affordable Learning Georgia and our objectives that we're trying to meet, and then go into the bigger stuff, the vision that came out of that. Because we started out as a pilot team that was unfunded at the time, trying to get together a one-year program that was in 2014, so things have changed quite a bit since then. So we are within the library. So we are a library-driven initiative within Galileo. There are other initiatives within Academic Affairs. There's ones for high impact practices. I'm sure your institution or your state has something that has to do with high impact practices. That specific list that Dr. Koo had put together, or an expanded one past that point. Things like precision academics, that's just more personalized learning, that type of thing. Gateways to completion is something that addresses the courses that students have trouble getting through, but if they get through them, suddenly they are on the path to success. They took a look at those pathways and found out those courses were the ones that needed some work. And so that's what they were looking at. They worked with ALG a little bit to get OER into these gateway courses. And then there's Complete College Georgia, which looks at retention and progression and graduation, mostly looking at degree completion. They started in 2012, and affordability was one of the things they addressed. 2014 was when we got started, and Complete College Georgia was the catalyst for things like that. They had a grant program that had a whole bunch of different approaches, and one of them was towards affordability. OER was in some of those grants. Those were kind of the proof of concept. So our big goal, if you're looking at academic affairs in general, and then looking at what we do, is we are trying to get some student success through equity. So it's not a thing where we are looking at the people who are succeeding already and increasing their performance. We are looking at the different achievement gaps that are out there, especially within our institutions, and seeing how educational resource access can help with that. So our big strategy based on that is that faculty would be replacing their expensive resources, the commercial materials that students had to purchase, with no cost and low cost resources. So due to that overall big strategy, we had a bunch of objectives under it. And I'll go through each of these. I don't have to explain them right here because we'll go through them in a second. So the first one that we needed to do is make sure that faculty and staff were aware that open educational resources existed at all. Oh, yeah, I saw something from Charlotte. That's great. Yeah, and so because of that, we needed to make sure that we were advocates, but we couldn't just be the advocates in the system office. That is kind of a recipe for all of your emails to get sent to junk soon enough. And what we needed to do was make sure that we had our advocates, our champions of open education and affordable resources at each institution. Luckily, there were already a lot of folks who were engaged in this, whether they were teachers who were using the materials, librarians who were providing access to them. We had our library coordinators and our campus champions at first. That has changed into a new thing where we have a library champion, a faculty champion, and a design champion, someone in the instructional design field. Or if you don't have an instructional designer with that kind of time, particularly in the pandemic when time is a valuable resource, an instructor who has a lot of instructional design experience. So those three from each institution meet with us monthly, but we wanted to go even further with that, and you'll see a little bit about that later. Also, we have a lot of outreach strategies. We are trying to reach out to folks through our website, through newsletters, through various media. We had a video campaign at one point. Video production isn't as big right now, partially because of the pandemic and partially because smaller amounts of information have really helped in getting the word out. The outcomes and the measures that we're looking at in that objective, the ways that we find out if this works, responses to surveys, seeing whether or not they are aware. That's a great thing. It is self-reported, but it is at least a good measure of where are we on OER? How much do people know? The amount of grant applications that we receive. So if you're aware, are you putting together some sort of proposal that would maybe make a big impact at your institution? Now, it's one thing to be aware of OER, and I'm sure that a lot of you know. It is another thing to be informed about it. You might know that OER exists and they are free, and that may be all you know. But not just understanding how Creative Commons licenses work, but how to put this stuff into practice is an entirely different thing. So we have events. We were going to do some in-person events this time around with our new strategic plan. And then COVID-19 happened and that did not work. So we have a featured speaker series of our grantees that did outstanding projects. They talk about what they did and how it helped their students and the process of creating this stuff. It ranges from adopting an OpenStax textbook to creating an entirely new open-ended historical game for a particular topic. It's a huge range, and it's largely due to the work of Tiffany Tiarina, our program manager, who had been reaching out to these folks, and it's been such a cool program. She also put together some asynchronous training. So if you're on the ALG website and you go to things like the kickoff materials, you can find the asynchronous training that each grantee goes through. There's also plenty of tutorials there to just help you out if you're interested, if you want to know more about OER. There's also quite a bit about accessibility. There are some other things that we wanted to do, though, with our champions. It's one thing to get everybody in the room and ask how things are going. You often wind up with a lot of silence. If you're talking to just the champions at one institution and you're not doing the whole recording thing and stuff like that, just having a discussion on how things are going on campus, you get a lot more meaningful stuff out of that. Not only what's happening at their particular institution, but what they need and what ALG could possibly be doing better to help out with this. So that's another way, because our champions are such a big part of this. And as turnover happens, we may have a champion that comes in who knows everything about open, or we may have a champion that comes in and knows absolutely nothing about open, but really wants to get to know it. So not only is it about what their institution needs, what ALG could be doing better, but it's also what each champion needs too. If they need, for example, training on Creative Commons, we would be working with them to make sure that they got that kind of thing. So the outcomes and measures of this, once again, survey responses, the quality of grant applications. If faculty are informed about how to use these materials, you're going to get better applications at that point. The knowledge level at the kickoff, how did they do in their asynchronous trainings? How did that work out? Oh, there we are. So the first tip in running a program like this that I want to get across is that open really thrives in large groups and communities and engaged, interconnected groups of people. You want to get involved. You want people to meet with you often. Even if there's absolutely nothing that you can share that's new, you still want to meet to connect and see how it's going. Share your experiences. You'll find something out. Even the most informal conversations can bring up the most meaningful change. Big projects absolutely need collaborators. Do not go it alone. If you have a really big project, bring people in who love this kind of work, because it's not something to run by yourself. I know, I've run these things by myself before. And yeah, if you have a regular meeting set up for your advocates, for your champions, that ensures that they all feel like they are part of something, part of a group, connected to each other. That's super important in this line of work. You can get really bogged down in the data, and the data is important, but the connections are just as important. So we're looking at things like making sure affordable materials are in the classroom. Our grants are that implementation of it, and we're looking at the savings measures, the student success measures, and whether or not these projects sustain over time. You can check out the ALG data center for that. We have all of our statistics over there. I will share that in the chat very quickly with you, because it is pretty easy to find. If you go onto ALG, there is a big button for it, but I will share it with everyone as well. So here's the everyone button. Great, there it is. There's our data center. When we look at savings, there's a big Excel sheet for that kind of thing. Looking at student success is a little bit different. The final report summaries on our page are the best way to take a look at that. You'll see not only how students did in comparison to previous materials that they used, but you'll also see perspectives from the instructors and the students on how it all went. Sustainability is more about whether or not things have continued for a particular group. That's a little bit more behind the scenes, but you can still see some continuation and discontinuation. The making sure that there is some sort of efficacy in this line of work. When we got started in 2014, there weren't many peer-reviewed articles out there about the efficacy of implementing OER. The Open Education Group, which is the research organization, was a twinkle in the eye of a few folks over at Brigham Young. It wasn't even getting started yet. So we needed to make sure that when these projects happened, that we had at least the same outcomes with lower costs, if not better outcomes because of the increase in access. So we are measuring that for our final reports for sure. And we make sure that our final reports are structured in such a way that we can bring all of that stuff together. But published articles are also really important. Presentations from folks on how it all went, our featured speaker series, that's very important as well. So the second tip here is, yes, absolutely collect your data regularly, but you also want to go beyond the numbers. So yes, keep an ongoing record of your program. Amy Hofer's on the call, and she does a wonderful job of this for Open Oregon. When did each project start saving students money? When we started out, they started in this fiscal year. And that's not a great way to track it because you may start in the summer, you may start in the spring, you may start in the fall. When exactly do they start? Which semester? How much is saved per semester, per year, by each project? And they can bring all of those together. And then you want to look at qualitative data too, because what made the project that kept going successful? What stopped the ones that didn't? I mean, I'm being a little positive on the slide, but be sure to know like what causes a discontinuation. For us, it's constantly turnover, which means that the past couple of years have been difficult because so many of our OER leaders are moving on to new positions, retiring. It's happening across higher education. It is absolutely happening in state governments and education in general. So it's a tough one, but keep gathering quotes, keep coding the things that you're hearing into different categories, see how those categories pan out over time. Look to find new trends and emergence of new ideas in those quotes. And yeah, exactly. Get to know what is in the way of further OER success. Is there a quality issue that faculty are having that can be measured, or you can look at it and say, okay, this actually does need work, or they do need these types of resources, but they don't exist. Awareness is another big thing too, because let's say that you have a department that has 5 faculty who are using OER, they are a close-knit group, and then their leader leaves. The others are kind of on their own a little bit, and then the rest of them have no idea what OER is. As opposed to a department that knows about it and they say, this is what we do, that's going to be a really tough one to sustain. So be sure that you're aware of that kind of knowledge. Yeah, collect anything that you possibly need to advocate for the life and goals of the program and report on how it's going. And be sure to measure what it is that your goals need. We are not in the position to dive too deeply into individual student success data as a system. We have the Research and Policy Analysis Office that we are currently working with on anonymized data that may make this better. But at first, it's been individual studies, like the one at UGA from Eddie Watson and Nick Colvard and Hyojin Park, where they disaggregated these student success data, not just saying when OER went into the same instructor class, students overall did better, but they looked at the difference between how better they did as Pell eligible students, as part-time or full-time students, students by different races and ethnicities. And they found that folks who would have a tougher time with access to materials because of their financial status, their socioeconomic status, were doing better disproportionately to the norm. So that was one big thing where we said, okay, this can keep going. This is something that should keep going, and we should keep taking a look at this. If you're looking at training and development programs, the Open Textbook Network, which is now the Open Education Network, has a great development program where the workshops that they have, you put them into your data dashboard if you're an administrator, and you can track how all of those things are going. Have faculty adopted past that point? So what's the percentage there? How much are they saving their students over time? Do they have any questions for you so that you could make this easier for them? I think that they have a great model there of following up and making sure that you're tracking the stuff that happens after all of your training and development. And are you making sure that your resources are accessible to everybody? Any feedback that you can get, any survey information that you can get, any questions that come back to you can really help with this. And of course, consider accessibility. Things like alt text for the OER that you are providing. So we have USG created OER too. We have some OER that had been adapted and improved or revised or geared towards a particular set of students, or ancillary materials were created for it. How do we encourage this? And then how do we measure how that is? Well, our mini grants are the big part of that. We started them out as calling them mini grants. Now they are known more as continuous improvement grants. They've grown over time. We also partner with the University of North Georgia Press, which has a workflow for creating open textbooks and having them open peer reviewed, both by faculty within the university system of Georgia and outside of it. So our outcomes there, it's tough to measure this stuff, but how much has been created? Okay, how much has been used? Download counts are tough because if you're looking at one download of a particular open textbook, if that's suddenly put into a learning management system and students have benefited from it for years, it's 2,000 students a year, like that's one download. So it's really hard to tell. But at least look at the use of those materials and see what people are using and why. Recognizing the exceptional efforts that have already happened has been a tricky one. We are really good at getting things done. We are not as great as taking a retrospective look and then awarding things based on that. Especially because we do not have in-person events, awards have been even tougher to do. We have at least helped faculty get recognized for their work within tenure and promotion policies. We created a set of guidelines that is an adaptation from the Doers 3 matrix. Doers 3 is a somewhat national, somewhat North American organization that creates some both guidelines and standards to go by for things like equity, tenure, promotion, and research. And so we used those guidelines to let faculty know if they are chairing a committee, what they could recognize, or if they are instructors applying, what they could bring out for recognition in OER work. Those measures are somewhat wishy-washy. I mean, how engaged are your faculty at that point? How sustainable are these projects now that you have helped them be recognized? How much more participation are you getting based on these awards? This is a tough one to do. Once again, I think if you have event tracking in the way that the Open Education Network does, it works out pretty well, but it's a tough one to do. Making sure that things are accountable, we are making sure that we have accurate quantitative data that can be as granular as possible. but at the same time understandable to our colleagues. So we have some really big Byzantine tracking sheets in Excel that are tracking all of the programs semester by semester. But we then bring that Excel stuff over into a visualization program called Microsoft Power BI. That creates the data dashboard that we have in our ALG data center. So yes, we want to make sure that it's accurate quantitative data, but then on the front end, we want to make sure it's understandable. Same thing with qualitative data. It needs to be insightful, personal. It needs to look into the numbers and say, this could be why. This is a trend. This is something that we need to look out for. So the more that people trust these numbers, the better that we've done at making this stuff accurate. The more that you look at a media release, some sort of press release, and you see accurate numbers that you're fine with, that's especially good. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we are learning and growing. And I could go over it here, but I'm going to go over it a little bit more here. So the big tip out of this is that you really want to keep listening, whether it's to the data that you are taking in, to the people who are doing the work, to the people who are running programs. Keep listening to them and meeting with them. What might help advance the goals of your program? What's working for other folks, especially those of you on the call? You have such great programs yourselves. Often I am looking at those and going, man, we really should do that. You don't have to go and jump at everything. I know that maybe about 4 years ago, we were discussing a lot of like, oh, how can the blockchain help out? Now, if you jumped on that, you probably are going, nothing really came of that, did it? You don't have to dive right in, but get to know what's out there. And based on, if you're really centered in your overall goals, then you'll know when something might help. So Manifold, which is a platform for open textbook hosting and a way to make static text more interactive, that's something that we've been working on for the past couple of years. We've named it OpenALG in our instance of it. And I will quickly get you a link to the homepage for that. So we're trying to go beyond a traditional repository in something that provides more accessibility, more interactivity through group annotations, through personal annotations, through highlighting in both of those same ways, searching across all of our open texts in a digital way. And that should be helping out. So that's one of the platforms that we did jump at because we thought this really helps our overall goals. And it could be you. You might have the next idea. And in that case, keep talking, share it with everybody else because we'd love to know too. Sometimes we're in a rut. We would love to know. So our grants, the way that we get a lot of things done through ALG, they are configured into two categories. One is continuous improvement and one is transformation. Transformation, replacing commercial materials. Continuous improvement, improving transformations from before by creating ancillaries, improving OER, revising OER, making a new edition of an open text, making an entire video series, lecture slides, open historical games, that kind of thing. We have a proposal system. They are peer reviewed. When they are awarded, we are basically funding the time that it takes to get the project done. The contract is with the institution. That's very helpful and also sometimes very confusing. It's not with an individual person, but when a group needs to add somebody, bring somebody new in, if a group loses somebody, I mean, it is the era of the Great Resignation right now. It is possible. That's a little bit easier when our contract is with the institution. All of our institutions have been awarded grants from Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College to Georgia Tech and UGA. So we've been doing that for a while, and that's great. But what else can we do? So we wanted to make sure that we kept asking questions first. So if we were going to make a new strategic plan, we needed to survey folks. We focused on OER. We didn't want to just go OER and this and this and this. Otherwise, the survey would have been pretty inaccurate. We also compared our survey with Bayview Analytics materials, which used to be known as the Babson Research Group, to compare the USG with national findings. We found that quality was extremely paramount in the USG. And if you're looking at the same years, it's less so nationally. So what we were seeing was we had higher awareness and a lower perception of quality and a higher perception of that problem as a barrier. There was also the other ones, which are not enough resources for my subject and too hard to find what I need. Those are kind of interconnected. Sometimes it's not enough resources, sometimes you can't find it. But quality was the big one. So we're like, well, what happened? We filtered it by whether or not somebody was a grantee, whether or not they said they've used OER before, and it stayed the same. So we wanted to know what that was all about. So we went into the open-ended responses and coded them, categorized them, like I was talking about before. We found some blanket statements like OER are generally poor quality, kind of a you get what you pay for. We would call it often a myth or a misconception. Some of them were much more in depth, like they knew about the peer review process of a particular text and they wished that it were better. That's a fair point. Another one about updating, about vetting, particular subjects. So I am in history. I don't like the open textbooks in history. Fair enough. There are some that go far beyond this into kind of socioeconomic, sociopolitical politics. And if you call something a Dollar Tree educational experience as a pejorative, there is a lot to unpack there, from where Dollar Trees open in the state of Georgia to what that means when it comes to what education is about, what it's for, what public education is for as opposed to private. There's a lot there. And so what we knew is that quality has a whole bunch of different things. It could be something that's very specific to how you're teaching. It could be to what you prefer. It could be to your subject area. It could even be political. You could hit a nerve just by trying to do open education. But then others will be pretty accurate on it. Well, compatibility with other resources, that's something that we definitely need to know. Having enough resources out there, and then making sure that we are getting the results out there for student performance as much as we can. We have selection standards that were based on this survey, and the standards have been the most visited page on our site, like more than the homepage, more than the grants, more than our data. I don't know if that's just because the SEO is guiding people towards selecting textbooks as finding things, but that's where it is. This is a list that we based off of QM and off of BC Campus's OER evaluation standards. The difference for us is that we differentiated it by open textbooks and ancillary materials. BC Campus started out with open textbooks. There's not too many differences, just a couple of different sections. And of course, manifolds, like I was talking about before. We hope that in the future, we can have more support for embedding interactive stuff in there, like H5P. H5P has been growing and growing. Then you've got H5P as a service. Then you've got all of the open hubs that are out there. We're still looking at what would work best for everybody here. Making sure that we put the ancillary materials for a particular thing with the open textbook that it was created for in the first place. That stuff is much more possible in Manifold than it was in our repository. What the great thing about this, just to kind of add one more thing, is that you don't have to teach faculty how to use a new resource in order to do this. If they have a structured Word document or a Word document where, okay, they used bold instead of putting heading 1 and heading 2, you can at least put the structure in there very easily. And then you have a structured HTML document that can become a digital resource very quickly through this program. It's all about conversion in Manifold. So they can create resources where they are. They don't have to learn a new thing in order to do it. And so what I'm saying here is that one of the big keys of running an OER program, particularly over the course of many years, is that stuff is going to change. This is the logic model from our pilot team in 2014. And you can see that some of it is still going on. Obviously, we still want to raise awareness among faculty. We think that raising awareness among students is very important too. We are not piloting things as much anymore as we used to, because that's not what's happening. OER is becoming a thing we do that takes a lot of time. So these grants are still there to support the time that it takes, but they're not going, hey, try this new thing. It's not necessarily so much of a new thing. We had a big USG bookstore partnership with the independent bookstores in our system, and many of them have moved to third parties. Quite a few of them have changed. Our biggest bookstore advocate, the head of that bookstore, got employed by VitalSource after a while, so it was interesting to see that transition. So yeah, things will change for sure in the short term, but if you look at the long-term thing, we still want college to be more affordable. We still want retention and progression and graduation to increase. So things are going to change quite a bit. In 2014, we had an adoption-only program. In 2016, we figured out that's not going to happen. When we had our first round of grants come through, they said, we created all these materials. We're like, great, we have no place for them. Oh no, we definitely need a repository. In 2016, we had a repository, but they were static files. So now we have Manifold as a textbook platform for creation. So in 2014, our training was have a big, giant in-person event. It was really cool. It got a lot of people involved. We had quite a few national figures in open back then come to UGA and talk to folks from the libraries, from individual departments, faculty instructors, instructional designers, and administrators. In 2016, we put some one-day events next to the Teaching and Learning Conference. In 2018, we moved into the Teaching and Learning Conference. Then the Teaching and Learning Conference dissipated and went online once COVID-19 happens, but it kind of unraveled right before then. So we had to do new strategies there. So we thought, yeah, we'll have new ALG exclusive events. We'll have them in person. In early 2020, we made that decision, and that changed very, very quickly. In March, we turned to a featured speaker series that would be fully online so people can share their successes and get into the intricacies of OER implementation. It was a nice change of pace. In 2014, we had 1 million webinars. In 2017, a lot of the offices around here were getting far less webinar traffic than they used to, and said, people are sick of webinars. We are not doing as many of them. We're going to go in person. Of course, 2020 hits and webinars come back immediately. So we retooled them to just share grant successes, which is nice. But I think moving forward, we also needed a way to provide some fundamentals, some training that goes into just what OER is, because not everyone who uses OER, who champions OER, are still around anymore. We now have a summer workshop series, and I will share that with you in the chat. This one, already we have 2 scheduled. One is coming right up on June 24th. This is from Georgia Southern, and this is all about Creative Commons. I'm going to be sharing different tools to use for open educational resources on July 22nd. And so we definitely have a lot of stuff to share. We've made a huge impact. Check our reports, check out the ALG Data Center. We've already shared some of those links in the chat. Some of you are very familiar with that. Some of you have taken that and ran with it and made something even cooler for your own programs. Continue to do that, please. If there's anything you like on these pages and you have questions on how to make it happen, just email me. I absolutely would love to work with you on how to get that done. I will put my email in chat. There you go. So why do we have all these numbers, and why would we even focused on cost or affordability? We had to kind of take a step back. We did a one-year program and said we need to get this done. Then we had an extra year and we said we need to get more of this done. And then we were suddenly a long-term program. So we went, well, how do we provide support? So we did for a while. And now we took a step back and said, okay, well, let's look at the why. Let's look at the just cause for all of this. And of course, we had the big OER equity study, Watson, Colbart, and Park. This was a same instructor study that focused on disaggregated data, as I had said. Here's a look at how that same instructor study would work. The black ones were about when people were teaching with commercial resources. The white ones are when they were teaching, I believe, with open materials. And so they looked at, okay, when are they teaching, when are they not? I think there's a gray one here. The exposure is a little weird too. The gray ones and the white ones are different, but it's not showing up here. But anyway, they looked at whether or not a particular instructor was using commercial materials, OER, or just not teaching at all. And I think maybe the not teaching at all is the black one. And they were seeing some disproportionate amounts. And these are just some graphics from that. It really opened our eyes towards what OER could do. And we're looking at OER to include all students in the classroom. Significant. So yeah, we still need more accessible OER. We still need more inclusive OER. We need better distribution methods. Once everybody went online during COVID-19, we knew that internet access was going to be a problem. People are pulling up to parking lots to download all of the stuff that they need for a course. If all you have is one big 200 megabyte open textbook, that might be either costly or way too long a time for those particular networks to support. So how do we do that in the future? So given everything from our start to the tips that we kind of came across over time to the programs that we have, we took a big step back and said, okay, so here's what we do from now on. Here is what we are as a long-term program. And this will look a little businessy because there's a vision and a mission, but it helps. So our mission is what we do. We promote student success and foster educational equity. And that's through supporting adoption, adaptation, and creation of affordable and open educational resources by USG faculty and professional staff. We are not throwing these at people. Faculty and staff are the ones doing that work. The vision is to have affordable, accessible, high-quality educational resources for every USG student in every course. That's lofty, but that's a vision for you. Our guiding principles are more about how we would make decisions in the future. The first one is that every single dollar that we spend on Affordable Learning Georgia ultimately is about students. You know, we reach out to faculty, we raise awareness for faculty, but it is leading towards student success at the end. We need to do a better job of reaching out to students. It's tough from a system perspective. Our champions do it better. Academic freedom is a big thing. We want to make sure that faculty are aware that they have support, but that we're not just telling them what to do. We can't from a system office perspective. That's not something that would lead to great outcomes. We know that good work takes time, and we know that open takes time. So we need to support that time. And we need to be open to all. We can't just have open textbooks authored by one particular demographic group. That's not how Georgia looks. It's not how Georgia works. We want to make sure that these resources are geared towards all of our students, not just some of them. And organizational behaviors are more about like how we operate. We want to make sure that we're agile, that we're doing things very efficiently, but we also want to make sure that we keep informed. So we're, staying up to date with not just what's going on in open, but what's going on in higher education. We want to make sure that we keep our minds as open as our resources and have some wide perspectives on what affordability can be, what open can be, what it can do. Is it not? I mean, are we just going to move forward with textbooks? I don't think we just say the textbook is dead the way that publishers like to say every year to make the news. But I do think that we have to keep considering what education does, how it works, and what open can fit in with there. And we are both persistent and patient. We want to make sure that people join us in open, but we also do not want to barrage everyone with emails every day or every week. We used to do a weekly newsletter. That was a lot. During Open Education Week, we used to have a newsletter every day. That's not going to work, especially after COVID. So we are somewhat patient, but we have to keep persisting on making sure that we get the word out at the same time. So I'm going to open this up for questions. If you have questions, you can type that into the Q&A. That's the best place to do so. You can also share it in the everyone part of chat so that everyone can see the question. We can address it there. I'm going to leave this open and silent for you. Here we go.
Looks like you've done a very great job, Jeff, of explaining everything. We don't have any pressing questions right now. As we leave a few more minutes open for our guest, we do have one question. So before I get to our poll, Tiffany?
I see it in the Q&A. That was a thank you.
Right. Looks like we have a thank you in the Q&A. But we do also have a question in the chat that says, how large is the ALG team in terms of number of people?
Yeah, so from Hillary Barker. Okay, so ALG itself has right now one full-time employee who's program director, and that's me. For a couple of years intermittently, that had been the case. We had brought in someone else to help out a couple of different times. One was one of the original people, the original advocates of open, Marie Lassiter. Back from 2000, she was making things open in the USG. So we worked together on really focusing more on instructional design at that point, because she was an instructional designer, she was a psychologist, she brought a lot of the qualitative stuff in. A couple of years ago, right before the pandemic, we hired Tiffany Tiarina as an instructional designer. So this was after Marie had retired. She had been in the system for about 30 years. So it was really cool to be there with her up until that point. Tiffany came in as a very new person. She had worked on grants at Kennesaw State as a graduate assistant and a project manager. And so she came to us with a lot of perspectives on teaching and learning. She moved our accessibility stuff forward. She moved our training forward. She is pursuing new opportunities as of July 1st. And that is part of her having a kid. She wants to take care of the kid full time. So that's a really big part of it. So I'm going to be on my own again on July 1st. So the answer right now is 1. The answer sometimes is 2. But then also we have our executive director of Galileo, Lucy Harrison. She works with a lot of the people up top in academic affairs and with our big strategic initiatives to help out too. So it's never just 1 or just 2. We have her support. I would say at least have somebody on staff that is paid for their time to do this kind of work. It is a lot. Yeah, and
Thanks.
of course, building community is a huge part of this, Amy. You're never just one if you've got all of your champions out there too. Lisa says, what kinds of handouts and resources do we give instructors for the purpose of training? We have not been on the kind of downloadable handout train for a little while, and that's partially just due to how COVID has gone. We have a lot of tutorials. For example, we have the Finding Free and Open Resources that is part of our ALG website, but also at OpenALG, we have a project collection of training resources, and these are from us and from other institutions. So we have our welcome training for champions, we have our kickoff training for our grantees, our accessibility series, and our rubric. And again, you'll see Tiffany Tiarina's name all over these because she did such an amazing job with training materials. Let's see here. So I've got Hillary, Lisa, I addressed Amy. Oh, Hillary says, thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. Oh, okay. So Dr. Ampadu, in what ways can we reach out to our students? What strategies can you suggest for more student involvement with OER? Okay, so I was very bewildered by this for a little while. You know, here I am in a system office, off campus, nowhere near students. What do? I got invited to an SEC event where all of these student government associations from the Southeastern Conference schools got together in one place. And the people running that event decided to focus on open education for one day of it. So I was their keynote speaker. And then I was like, well, UGA is right here. So I went over and talked to their student government. They wanted to put this on their platform. They thought not only is it something that a student government could help with, but it's something that someone running for president would love to talk about. Like, there are free materials out here and you are spending how much for Campbell biology? Like, that's really exciting. So we talked about ways that action could take place at UGA, and they, because students have a lot of power, brought together the president or the chancellor, the vice chancellors, including, okay, so they're called a president there. Other places are called whatever. The big decision makers at UGA all got together in a room with the student government and with us. And we talked about ways to help out. One was student outreach to faculty to let them know, like, I'm a student in your course, and here is this OpenStax textbook in biology that costs nothing, and it would really help me out if more people got to know this thing. Other stuff that happened, though, was that the Center for Teaching and Learning was there and said, you know what, we had a grant-funded position by the Gates Foundation that helped out with Open, and it worked pretty well, and then that person had to leave because that funding ran out. If we had more permanent support on our team for supporting Open, that would work really well. Well, not only do they have OER support now, but they're running their own grant program. So for individual instructors who aren't ready for a big system office teamed up giant grant, but want to get some work done in their course, they can at UGA apply for a provost grant too. So that's been really nice it's been a great example of a student government association getting everybody to talk and then actual things happening as a result. So yeah, reach out to the SGA in any way that you can. They would be the first place to go to get a good voice of the students going, and to find a way that that voice can reach people in powerful positions at your institution.
Thank you, Jeff. This has been a wonderful webinar. Before everyone leaves, I'm going to launch the poll here. Just a few questions. If you can, please go ahead and just tell me, did you enjoy today's webinar? Were you able to follow the format easily? And if you enjoyed the content. Just a few moments, if you would do it. We are almost at 100%. All right. Just a few more seconds. In the last minute, I would like to thank you again, Jeff. I would like to thank Tiffany for joining me and Jeff and helping with the questions. I would like to thank our director, who I see has joined us and stayed on most of, if not all, of the webinar. Our new director, Dr. Michael Jesus. And also, I'd like to give a shout out to a future presenter who is Robbie Melton, who is fast becoming my second mentor in OER. Jeff, she's going to take your place in just a minute. But anyway, it is now 12 p.m. We're done with our poll. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Oh, and hi, Robbie. Life is good.